Cooke. The subject is an unusual commute. With the subject, an unusual commute, please welcome Finlay Cooke.
Can you remember what you were doing on the morning of Christmas Eve in 2001? Were you dreaming of Santa? I was lying in my bed. I was sleeping. I was dreaming about Scottish snow-covered landscapes and roaring log fires. But my dream was rudely interrupted from my morning call in the garden of parrots, lorikeets and cockatoos. I was in Sydney, Australia at the time, and unfortunately I was working for Bank of Scotland. But there were some positives about the job. The weather was fantastic, and I had my bike, my toy, my boy's toy, my MV Augusta Superbike. I commuted every day to work on it. And I was all lying there in my slumber. I remembered the previous week, my commute. I was coming up through Neutral Bay, boom, 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 coming up to the traffic lights, one of the busiest junctions in Sydney, major show-off mode. I was coming to a halt. I had my banker's brogues on at the moment. I was rushing in for a meeting, and I was coming to a halt. I put my foot on the brake. I noticed my laces got tied up in the brake. And the more I moved, the more I lost control, and in front of hundreds of people, I fell, and the bike was on top. Fortunately, a strong, young Aussie guy pulled the bike off me. "You all right, mate? You don't know how to ride one of these things, do you?" As I was waiting for my slumber, I vowed not to make that same mistake again. So I got ready for work that day, and I made sure I put my boots on. So there I was, going up through Neutral Bay. No problems this time. I was turning left onto the Pacific Highway. Now the Pacific Highway is 14 lanes of traffic going over the Harbour Bridge. And at that time in the morning, it's solid traffic. But I was on my bike, and you're allowed to use the bus lanes. Right in the middle, down I was zooming, past these queues of cars. And there was one car ahead of me, caught my eye. A silver Mercedes convertible, with a particularly attractive young blonde lady in it. So I thought, right, here we go, show-off mode again. And I pulled a wheelie past. Have you ever had that feeling that you're being watched? I had a passenger that day that I didn't realise. Very slowly, from above the instrument panel, these 8 legs appeared. 8 hairy black legs. I couldn't move. I was transfixed. He came further. The 8 eyes were looking at me, straight in my face. This was what the Sydney-siders call a huntsman. You and I would call it a tarantula. The body was bigger than the palm of my hand. Its legs were longer than my fingers. I'd woken him from his slumber, and he was angry. He moved towards me again, his mouth opened. These 2 fangs came out the side. These fangs would pierce your fingernails. He bit me. That was it. 70 miles an hour down the button. I totally lost it. Time stood still. Commuters were looking outside their window. His motorbike, it's 70 miles an hour button. Holding on with his legs, trying to steer. I had to do something right then. I reached in, I got him, I picked him up, and I threw him as far as I could. There was a flash of silver in the distance, and he was gone. I eventually got into work. I arrived at the office, ghost-like, shivering, quaking, wet mess. I walked into the office. Nobody looked at me. they were all gathered around these screens. It was a dealing room with a bank of TV screens. And Jamie, the head dealer, came over to me and said, "Finlay, gosh, you look bloody awful, mate. What's wrong with you? Hey, you come over the Harbour Bridge, don't you? Come and have a look at this. Come and have a look at this." And we looked up at the screens, and it was the Harbour Bridge. And it was empty. It was 8 o'clock in the morning, and it was empty. There was nothing on it. And the TV moved to a reporter at the scene, a 10-mile queue of traffic going back through Chatsworth. The reporter was saying, "I'm live ahead of this traffic jam. Fortunately, no one's been injured, but there's chaos in Sydney today. This has never happened since the bridge was built in 1932. And he turned to a vaguely familiar, blonde, very attractive lady in a silver convertible Mercedes. And she was sitting. "I don't know what happened. I was driving along and it was the queue as usual coming down toward the bridge. And then suddenly this bike came past me, it pulled a wheelie. And then from nowhere, this big person came behind me. And I didn't realise they could fly." At that moment, it dawned on me exactly what had happened. I slunk away back from the TV screens. That was a true day, true story of the day I brought Sydney to a halt.